Did you do the recording?
Welcome, everyone. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
And I'm Sylvia Earle. I'm an ocean elder, explorer in residence, National Geographic, and founder of Mission Blue.
This is our show, Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations with the ocean community on topics of wonder and interest. And now the most wonderful and interesting part. I'm going to try to share my screen.
Oh, technology. Love it.
Huh. We actually seem to have it worked out today. I'm shocked. Oh, now I have
screen.
Play.
Almost there. There we go.
Amazing, Yay. Amazing. Later on in this conversation, you're going to be able to ask some questions. You can write them in the Q&A box, and we'll get through as many as we can towards the end of the program. And there'll be links added in the chat that relate to some of the topics we're going to be talking about today. And before we really get underway, we want to remind everyone that
the world is obviously blue.
Today, we're very honored to be joined by the Honorable Bernadette Jordan. She is the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard. Welcome, Minister Jordan.
Yes,
thank you so much for having me.
Here you are at work. Also at work now. We understand that your time's really limited today and you may be called out, but I'm really grateful that you're here with us this afternoon or this evening for you.
It's a true honor to be here with you. I'm very looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. We wanted to start off with a little video that your staff sent, if I can actually manage to play the video. Here we go.
This is Canada.
Yes. Incredible. Canada's really come a long way in the last 5 years with the addition of the new MPAs. It's a lot like Sylvia's Mission Blue, relying on local partners to help create the hope spots and swimways that link the hope spots together.
I mean, when I was a kid, nobody thought we needed to protect the ocean. The ocean was too big to fail, right? Well, look at today. Now we know what we're putting in, what we're taking out, but largely really not grasping what you, Minister Jordan, you really do get it. You understand that the ocean really affects all of us everywhere all the time.
It's so much a part of who we are. I mean, of course, we were talking before we started that, Canada is a coastal nation. We have three oceans. We have the longest coastline in the world. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect it.
Yeah. And tell us about the Tuviawituk initiative. I hope I got that right this time.
That is it's a marine protected area in the north. It makes up close to 320,000 square kilometers of protected ocean. Of course, when we first came into government in 2015, less than 1% of Canada's oceans were protected. And we set out to change that. So we've now got 14%. We're well on our way to 25% by 2025 and 30 by 30. But that one was so special. That one was an area. It actually translates. It's an Inuit word, and it translates to mean the land where the ice never melts. That's a rough translation, but that's what it means. And this was an all hands on deck type of MPA. We worked in collaboration with the Kikitani Inuit Association, with the Nunavut government. Of course, Parks Canada was involved, Department of Fisheries and Oceans was involved, and Transport Canada was involved. It was such a group effort. It was such a wonderful experience because it was everyone collaborating and working together, because it was so important for us to make sure that this is protected. This is a protected area.
Absolutely. Do you think it could be kind of joined with others, make sort of an iceway to kind of?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things we often look at is marine spatial planning when it comes to our marine protected areas and those networks and refuges that can all come together to form bigger areas of conservation. And of course, we put new standards in place when it came to our marine protected areas. Oh, look at that. Isn't that a wonderful picture? So, I think that the networks are going to be extremely important, because there's so many places that need to be protected. And that's the goal, is making sure that we're working in collaboration. And, that hasn't always been easy. I think one of the big things I've seen is a change in attitudes towards marine protected areas.
Right.
I think that initially, when I was first elected, and I was the chair of the Fisheries Committee before I became the minister, we did a year-long study on marine protected areas. And as soon as you said marine protected area, people thought you were closing down industry. Oh, you're going to close down our fishery. That was the first thing everyone thought. And I think that, that's changed, so that now we're seeing industry working with us. Now we're seeing, the best marine protected areas are built from the ground up, with the communities and the coastal people who are impacted directly by them. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important to continue those collaborative efforts.
Yes.
Absolutely agree on that.
Bottom up
point.
and top down.
Yeah.
It's also
Absolutely.
the whole approach for Mission Blue, dealing with local champions and communities, and really understanding that these are not, when you say no take, it's really give back. You're restoring the depleted systems. You can't take wildlife everywhere all the time in any numbers, and yet that's the ethic that I grew up with. Everything was free out in nature. You just go take. But we've taken so much for so long. We have to give nature a break.
It's not sustainable, and that's what we recognize. And one of the things that, of course, I live right on the ocean. I live in a fishing community, and there's a number of harvesters that are my neighbors and my friends, and they recognize that if we don't do something now, it won't be there for their kids and their grandkids and their great grandkids. So we need to make sure, we need to make sure that we are protecting it for the future. And one of the other things I think that was really, really important that we did, the Fisheries Act is one of the oldest acts in Canada. And every now and then a government gets brave and modernizes parts of it. And in 2017, we opened the Fisheries Act, and we made some changes. And one of the things that we did that was significant, or we did a number of things, but we made sure that Indigenous knowledge was included in our Fisheries Act when we're making decisions, that Indigenous knowledge is part of that process, because of course, Indigenous people are the first stewards of the land and the water, and taking science into account, taking local knowledge into account, and taking Indigenous knowledge into account is really the way that we build these in a collaborative fashion. So I think that's been a key piece for us, as well as working with First Nations communities.
Absolutely.
And what is also beginning to be recognized is, in addition to that deep knowledge that people who have been in close association with the place for not just centuries, but in some cases thousands of years, to respect that, at the same time realizing that we're in the 21st century now with 8 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
And what worked 500 years ago, or even 100 years ago, or maybe even 50 years ago, has to be recalibrated in light of the changes that have taken place and the expectations that were born of a different time, put into perspective with today's reality. So many of the fish that were there in abundance. Again, when I was a kid, their numbers are down to 10%.
Yeah.
In some cases, even less than that. We're really good at finding and catching and marketing wildlife. And to be able to continue in any basis at all, we've got to do exactly what you're actually implementing. Give nature a break and let's build back.
Well, and the other thing too is what I mentioned, the Fisheries Act specifically. One of the other things that was put in place, enshrined in law, is that once stocks get into the critical zone, we have to have rebuilding plans in place. You can't just let them, it's not enough to conserve. It's not enough to conserve what you have. You have to grow what you have.
Yes,
It's
we're
bringing
so
it back
low.
to abundance. It's making sure that, you hear about people saying, well, we've got to conserve this. Absolutely. But it's then we need to go one step further. And we need to figure out, how do we grow those populations? And sometimes those are really tough decisions. Sometimes, I've had to make some really, really hard fisheries management decisions because of the state of stocks, and recognizing that those are impacting people's livelihoods. But if we want them to grow back, we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to bring them back.
And there's another aspect that is emerging now in the 21st century, and that is we've changed our way of thinking about whales. They used to be products, pieces of meat. Now whale watching and even fish watching, as well as bird watching, we're looking with a kind of empathy for life across the board, all life, not just our fellow mammals or our beautiful birds, but we're looking at all life in the sea as something to be regarded as more than just products.
It's really getting into that whole nature positive world approach and really looking at ocean literacy, the SDGs, particularly SDG 14. It ties back into all the ocean related issues, and valuing these systems and the wildlife alive, really recognizing that they have an economic value as well.
Tourism is really amping up the economics of
and climate change is changing so much as well. I mean, we now have whales in areas where we've never seen whales before, and of course that has made us have to move to make changes to the fisheries in order to protect the whales, the North Atlantic right whales. I mean, there's less than 400 of them left. And now they're coming in numbers to the Gulf and the Gulf area. So we've had to put. But I will say the great thing for me with this one was, this was done with the industry. They recognized how important it was. So we worked with them to come up with like better gear types to close off areas. We've worked out a whole plan with them in terms of, if a whale is sighted in this area, we're going to close it down. You have to get your gear out. And they do it because they know how important that is. So it's just been, and touch wood, it's been 2 years we've been doing that. We haven't had an entanglement in those areas in those 2 years. So that's been extremely, extremely important.
That's really good. And I mean, Canada has the longest coastline in the world, and you're going to be hosting Impact 5 coming up very soon.
That's for International Marine Protected Area Conference. So
so it's a very appropriate space. And right now you're working on this Pacific AOI, or area of interest.
Yes.
I'm interested, that's for sure.
And reading about it, it seems this area is believed to contain about 90% of Canada's seamounts, and just really a huge amount of biodiversity. And again, it's taking that precautionary stance on melting out protection for the seamounts, because they're so often targeted for extraction before we really know anything about them.
Right.
Well, and of course the thermal vents as well. They're extremely important too. And so that area is, look at that. I'm just loving these pictures that you're putting. It's and I think one of the things that has been really kind of altering for us with regards to MPA is the standards that we've put in place. It's not enough to say, here's your protected area, and then not do anything about it, and making sure that those areas are enforced. So we've actually put in place four main standards that in a marine protected area, you cannot have any drilling, you cannot have any bottom trawling, you cannot have any mining, and you cannot have any dumping. Those are the four standards that were put in place in 2019 for our marine protected areas. So those are actually, just guiding principles that are so important, because up until then, you could have a marine protected area and still have those things happening in them.
Right.
And that's not the case anymore. So I think that was really important. And of course, the Pacific area of interest is a large area. It's a significant amount of area that needs to be protected. But can you imagine bottom trawling there? Like when you look at these pictures,
yeah, or or mining,
or mining, it's
dumping anything, it's just,
anything.
Yeah.
So it is extremely important to have standards and regulations to back up the not just heading a target saying, here's our targets and this is how we're going to do it. It's putting the money on the table to make sure that you're enforcing things, to putting the standards in place, to putting the regulations in place. And I will say the team at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has done a phenomenal job, really ramping these up for us and making sure that we're doing everything that we can, because it's Canada, I think, since Prime Minister Trudeau was elected in 2015 and I was elected with that government, oceans has become a priority for us, not just domestically, but internationally as well. You've said it yourself, we've got 3 oceans, we've got 250, we've got the longest coastline in the world. It just makes sense that we are leading in terms of ocean protection, as well as, ocean science. It's all things that we're working really hard on. We had the Charlevoix, when we did the G7 in Charlevoix, it was an ocean themed. We said marine plastics is something we have to deal with, ocean pollution, ghost gear. Those are all things we have to deal with. The Prime Minister is a member of the high level panel on ocean sustainability. Of course, the work we're doing with ProBlue to help developing island states with their ocean economy. And of course, developing a blue economy strategy. All of these things are part of what it means to really take on the ocean as a huge part of who you are.
exactly.
One of the things that hit scientific headlines not so long ago was the discovery of these ancient glass sponge reefs. Right. Some of them within diver depth, but many of them beyond that depth. You need a submersible or remotely operated system even to understand that they're there. Oil fishermen used to sometimes bring them up in their nets, which is probably how these were obtained.
How you got those?
Oh my goodness.
We've got a bunch of them here.
Yeah, it's truly glass. I mean, silicon dioxide, the same kind of material that's in that glass you're using to drink out of.
Yeah.
But they're so
right
elegantly structured. They're beautiful
and
ancient.
And animals that live inside of them,
Yeah, these are
symbiotic.
Right, little
Exactly.
crabs set up housekeeping inside. They go in as larvae, and then that's their glass palace for life.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they.
So it's not just about protecting the sponge reefs. It's protecting the biodiversity that relies on it.
Absolutely, yeah, like a coral reef.
Yeah, exactly, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Before there were coral reefs, there were sponge reefs.
Yep, glass sponge.
And these are like ancient relics of that long ago time. They're said to be, in some instances, just a continuation from the Jurassic, where continents move around, of course, and things change over time. But in the deep sea, some things have retained their integrity. It's really exciting that they're living systems. It's like going back in a time machine to dive on a sponge reef and say,
we're still discovering them as well, which is, the ocean is so vast and changing. It's so dynamic. But there is still, there's still discoveries of these glass sponge reefs. It's mind-boggling, because you think that people would know that they were there, but they don't. So
they don't know. This is sort of, out of sight. World.
Out of sight, exactly. Yeah.
So earlier this week, I saw a news article about a humpback whale that was off the coast of BC, and poor thing was literally pinned to the bottom by over 900 meters of line, traps, buoys, all manner of stuff that it was just hopelessly entangled in.
Like this poor thing.
Like this one, this is
Yeah.
not that same whale, but
No.
it shows, as you're saying, like part of the entanglement issues and why, you have to pull gear when these guys are coming through. But, this ghost fishing gear is just such a terrible scourge. And, people are out there trying to, risk their own lives to save these animals. Because like us, they're mammals, they get stuck, they are weighed down, they can't breathe, and they actually, they drown, and or their flukes get cut off. Or
I think this is an attitude among fishers that is changing too, because
Absolutely.
nobody thought about you get a rip in your net, it slides away or gets lost. But now taking responsibility for the gear. Some of the gear that was lost back in the 1960s is still out there.
Yeah,
it doesn't go away.
It doesn't
just
break
continues
down.
to accumulate.
No. I remember when I was younger, when I was a kid, there was a television commercial on one time where it was this older fisher, and he was out on the boat with his grandson, and his grandson had like a can of pop, and he said, "Where do I put this can, Grandpa?" He says, "Well, you just throw it overboard." He goes, "But where does it go?" He says, "It goes away." Like, because that was that was
Probably
what they
still out
thought.
there.
It just goes away, but it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. And we've made significant investments over the last couple of years, and in the recent budget for what we call the Ghost Gear Fund. And it's actually industry working with communities, working with to go out and collect ghost gear, to go out and actually, when they're not fishing, they take they go out and they retrieve it. We had some just off the coast of Nova Scotia this past year. I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of 9 tons of ghost gear that they retrieved.
Incredible.
And and the sad part is that's the drop in the bucket, but at least that it's a start. But it's not enough to take it out of the ocean. You got to, because I don't want to see it coming out of the ocean and going into landfill. No. So we're also looking at ways to creatively recycle it, and find. So there's some people who there's one company who takes all the plastics, who turns it into biodiesel. There's another company who is taking some of the ropes and turning it into like patio stones type of things. There's all kinds of things that can be done with it, but it is definitely a problem. So we had the Ghost Gear Fund on the East Coast, and now it's moved to the West Coast. They're out there. They're starting up this month with the retrieval out there. So we're hoping to get a whole bunch more out. But it's going to go on for another couple of years. We've funded it for the next few years to keep trying to get as much of it out of there as possible.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be wasting waste.
No.
The other thing too with the Ghost Gear Fund that we've done is, and with another fund is looking at gear types, and we had a full summit with industry last year, a gear summit on what is easy breaking rope for so whales don't get entangled, or something that shoots to the surface once a whale is attached to it, so that we know where it is and we can retrieve it. And all of these things are coming from industry, because they're the ones who are out there on the water. They know what's going to work. And we had people from Maine come. We had people from, it was great. It was so good to see the industry coming together and saying, okay, how are we going to protect these whales? What do we do to make sure our gear is going to help the situation? Right. So, because they can't give up fishing, but they can do things to help the situation. So we've been working collaboratively with industry on these kind of projects, which has been very, very helpful.
That's outstanding, because it as you say, it sits out there and it's just waiting to either be collected and repurposed, or it's going to continue.
It doesn't break down too easily either.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No.
But then there's the whole issue of the abandoned and long forgotten vessels.
Yeah.
And this map kind of just shows some sites out there, but it's a global problem. All over the world we've got shipwrecks that have just been forgotten. We had one here off the coast of California, the Lukenbach, and everybody forgot about it until it started leaking oil, and then birds are being oiled, and everybody thought, oh, it's somebody's got a magic pipe on their boat and they're dumping oil. But no, it was this forgotten wreck, and it was just leaking. And we worked together with our Coast Guard and salvage divers, and were able to get the oil recovered from it. But there's these sites all around the world where it's not just the oil and gas, but sometimes it's these munitions as well that are sitting on seabed. And it's
Yeah.
like, how do that's just like everywhere.
It used to be, well, think about World War II, convenient way to dump things again.
Just over the side.
Goes in the ocean.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Even right now, there's an issue about the DDT that was dumped off
California.
Southern California, near Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it's
I have to make a correction because my staff just texted me and said it was 63,000 tons of ghost gear that came out of the
Oh,
wow.
Okay.
So
Incredible.
I had to correct that.
That's good.
But with regards to the abandoned vessels, I mean, I think part of the challenge too is that is making sure you remove them before they sink. That's
Yes.
got to be, I mean, we have so many. So, and this was actually something that it was my very first it was my first legislation that I worked on. When I was first running, we had a couple of very large old Navy ships, basically, that someone bought for $1 back in the day. There it is right there. That's the one.
Yeah.
And that was very close to my home. And so when I was out campaigning, a lot of people said, can you do anything about the cormorant? And I said, well, I'd do as much as I could. And then when I got to Ottawa and I started talking to people from the West Coast, I realized that this wasn't just a problem in my community. This was a problem across the country. There were thousands of these boats that were just left. And there was no law against just leaving them behind. Like, you could literally park it wherever you wanted and walk away from it. And that was, there was no law against it. You don't have, if you've got a transport truck, you can't park it on the side of the road when you're finished with it and walk away from it. So why could you do that with a boat? Right. And they were washing up on beaches. They were, like, I saw pictures of some that were just, so, I mean, we put legislation in place to actually finally address this, this long-term problem and, we also, once again, put money behind it so that communities could apply to have smaller boats removed. They could, we would pay 75% of it, and the town or municipality or city could pay the other 25%. I mean, the big ones like this one, I'm proud to say, was removed last November. It took 5 years, but I got it out of there.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
And what a terrible fate for a vessel that had been so useful and had a wonderful, productive history.
Well, yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing about that vessel, it was that one was the first vessel that a woman had served on in the Canadian Navy. Yeah, that was the first time a woman had served on a vessel was on that ship. So, and it was funny because there was one of the gentlemen who worked at the Coast Guard who was helping with the removal. I was talking to him, and he said he was in the Navy before he went in the Coast Guard. He said, a ship should never have been left to look like this. And he was absolutely, astounded that this is what had happened. So, right. I mean, it's been so important to coastal communities to have something in place that actually removes these vessels before they become problems. Because, I mean, we had one off the coast of Nova Scotia a number of years ago. It broke a tug line. It was being towed, and it broke a tug line, and it crashed. They just kept going, left it go, and it went onto the beach, and it leaked oil, and it cost $15 million to clean it up. When I think of what the province, we have a small province. When I think of what the province of Nova Scotia could have done with $15 million rather than cleaning up a mess like that.
Yeah, totally preventable.
Yep. So those are the kinds of things that, and you're right. Sometimes they're down there for a long time before they start to leak, but they do.
Yeah, but they do. And we're fortunate that we have some technology today that allows us to actually, go back and remove some of these vessels, or at least to remove associated fluids or munitions or other contaminants, toxins, because otherwise they just sit there and they leach and they get into the food chain, and you're just sort of inundated with this stuff, but you never see it. You're not really, like to your point, if it kind of fell off a truck or container fell off the truck on the side of the road, everybody would be up in arms if you get the crane, get this thing out of here. But under the water, it can sit there, 40, 50, 60 years.
Well, it's out of sight, out of mind, right? Yeah. If people don't see it, they don't think it's a problem.
Yeah.
Until it becomes one.
Right. And sometimes it's fairly insidious. Someone gets injured, they pull up some, old bomb or something like that, or it's a slower process where there's just sort of contamination within the food chain. That people are consuming it, and they don't understand why.
Mustard gas containers were hauled up off Hawaii in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, and of course, there's also groups who actually, and I will say that the cormorant, which is this one that's on the screen right now, that's it leaving in November. They originally had purchased that to scuttle it as a dive park.
Mhm.
That was what the intention was. And then thank God this was 20 years ago, because it sat there for 20 years.
Wow.
So thank God the government of the day went, no, you can't do that. So then they just kind of left it.
Yeah, just
Nothing
left
happened
it.
to it. And it sunk twice. And it just got to the point, and it's not that deep there. I mean,
No.
it sunk, so it sat on the bottom, but you could still see the whole top of it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it was quite it was a very happy day for me to see that go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it really is a shame when you have a vessel like that. I think it's the same vessel that found the bell from the Edmund Fitzgerald, and so
Yes.
it's like this very storied vessel, but
It's a museum piece.
but at a point, it really the highest best use is to again recycle it, repurpose the metals, the steels, and so forth, and not have them contaminate the seabed.
Yeah, and oftentimes what you have happening well, we've changed things now so that the government of Canada cannot sell them for $1 anymore to anybody. So, but what happens is, people buy them speculating that they can just take them apart themselves for scrap metal and make money, but then they realize they can't do it. So they've got this large vessel that they don't know what to do. They don't know what they're going to do with it anymore.
Right,
So,
they can't go back.
no.
But then there's the glorious Coast Guard, and I'm such a fan of the Coast Guard. They're based here.
Everybody
in
is.
Alameda.
Everybody is.
We have our Pacific Command close by, so we get to see all their valuable work all the time. But they're such an interesting group, doing everything from coastal patrol to emergency response to everything, search and rescue, all kinds of different missions that they have.
Gathering data.
Mhm. We were fortunate enough at DOER to have an opportunity to work off of the Tully, which is sort of it's actually set up more as a research ship.
It's a research ship, yeah.
Research ship, but it still falls within the purview of the Coast Guard. But how's the Coast Guard working to help with all these different areas that your office is working on?
So, I mean, the Coast Guard plays such an important role, in our marine space, and we're actually working right now to rebuild the fleet. Some of our ships are getting up there in years. We're building 2 polar icebreakers. We're building some new science. We've actually had the delivery of 2 new science research vessels, as well as a number of smaller vessels, midterm icebreakers. So those are all things that we're in the process of doing now, because the largest ship we have is the big icebreaker. By the time the new polars come into effect, she'll be 62 years old and well past her best days. So we are, but recognizing, how important the North is, and to Canada's sovereignty, to making sure there's supply, the science that we need to do with regards to climate change in the North. The Coast Guard plays a significant role. And, I'd also like to give a huge shout out to the US Coast Guard too, because we had a situation actually here off the coast of Nova Scotia earlier this year where one of our scallop boats was taking on water and sinking quite quickly. And it was a joint rescue. They managed to get 30 people off the ship before she sank. They got everybody off in time, but it was a team effort with the Coast Guard helicopters from the US and the Coast Guard from Canada. And they would kind of they could go and they could take 5, and then they had to go and take them and drop them off and then come back and get 5. And I knew a number of people on that ship, but there were a number of the men there that I grew up with. So it was quite an emotional time for all of us, just keeping our fingers crossed all night. And it was during the night, of course, these things never happen during the day. But it was a joint effort between the Canadian Coast Guard and the US Coast Guard. And it was wonderful to see that collaboration, and the fact that they saved those 30 people was just phenomenal.
Yeah,
it could have been a horrific
terrible loss of life,
different outcome if we didn't work together.
As we're seeing decrease in the sea ice in the northern area as well, it seems like it's even more important that the Coast Guard's going to have their hands full in terms of dealing with potential vessels in crisis, and not to mention just enforcement of the protection policies that the country's trying to keep in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, with the North, with it opening up, it's sad because of climate change that this is what's happening, but we have to be prepared for it. So making sure that we have that presence there, making sure that we're still able to supply the North, because of course, with sea lift, that's it's often the only way we get supplies to the North, to these coastal communities, is through the Coast Guard. So they play an extremely vital role, and I have so much respect and love for the Coast Guard. They do amazing things.
They really
But
do.
cooperation dealing with a high Arctic is really vital. Particularly that area where nations come together, there is a bit of high seas beyond the jurisdiction of any of the Arctic nations. Even Canada, you go out 200 miles, but still, depending on how the exclusive economic zone is calculated, Russia is trying to claim more than the 200 miles because of the extension of the seabed. But no matter what, there's a little chunk of ocean that is high seas, that is global commons. I mean, taken as a whole, half the world approximately is high seas, the global commons.
Mm-hmm.
And working together, particularly with respect to climate change and biodiversity loss, it's that which serves all of us all the time, everywhere, to take care of our global commons, whether it's the air, the diversity of life, and certainly the ocean. And the Arctic certainly comes into sharp focus for Canada. Your role in protecting that critically important area with respect to climate. And so it's great that someone that with your ethic is really having influence at exactly the right time. So bravo.
Absolutely.
Well, as I said, I think Canada has really wanted to be and is now actually working very hard to be a global leader with regards to oceans and ocean protection, and making sure that we are working in collaboration with partners to advance those goals, and of course there's so much that needs to be done, and sometimes when you look at the big picture, it can be a bit daunting because we have let it go for a very, very long time before we've actually taken action. But if we let that stop us from doing anything, we'll never get anywhere. So, and I mean, with regards to, you talked about the offshore, the far offshore, one of the big challenges, of course, is the illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. That's accounting for 30% of the fishing that happens around the world.
Even legal fishing.
Illegal fishing. Yeah.
No, the legal, not illegal. The legal fishing. The expectations are so high, and they're born of a time when it was a different ocean.
Yeah.
But I think we're beginning to understand that when the populations are doing this, you've got to rethink how much
what's happening.
Yeah.
And we're working right now, of course. One of the big challenges that we're seeing on the coast of British Columbia specifically is the wild Pacific salmon, and the steep declines we're seeing in some of those stocks. Some by up to 90%. And of course, in British Columbia, wild Pacific salmon is so culturally important to the people. It's so much a part of who they are, that this is having devastating impacts on our First Nations communities, on our, it's just it's something that we've taken huge strides to try and address the challenges, and some of it is climate change. A lot of it's climate change with regards to habitat degradation, with regards to, then of course we have overfishing in this is the IUU fishing, the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishery. Those are all things, but of course with salmon, because they spend part of their life cycle in rivers, we don't have jurisdiction in rivers, so we have to work with the province of British Columbia to because they have the same goal as us, and that's to see more fish. It's making sure that we not only protect and conserve, but grow to abundance. That's kind of my mantra.
We have some questions coming in.
Yeah, we're going to jump on to some of the questions because I know you don't have a ton of time today.
I hope you have some time.
Yeah.
Oh, I could talk to you guys forever.
I know, but duty calls sometimes, right?
Yeah, I know.
So Riley is asking if you could provide an update on the proposed Southern Strait of Georgia National Marine Conservation Area, and what will that look like? in terms of the uses.
Oh boy, you know what? I don't know if I have that in my notes. Hang on a second.
That's the thing about the questions. They always
I
like,
have
"Man."
got so many I've got pages of marine protected areas here that we're working on, and I'm not really sure which one it is. Hold on just a second, because I have probably about 15 that I'm working on.
Kids, they all going to kind of link together and be really supportive for the whole area.
I think that's part of the answer, that you are really seriously.
State of Georgia. Okay, here we go. It's okay. So yeah, it's the one. It is to protect the glass sponge reefs. It prohibits all bottom contact, contacting of commercial, recreational. There is allowed food, social, and ceremonial fishing allowed in it for Indigenous people. It's in British Columbia, and it's 17 fisheries area closures for that.
Oh.
For that one, yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, but you've got a lot of those big marine mammals passing through there too, so it's an important area for them.
Thanks, Riley. Sorry about that. Sorry I didn't have that answer at the tip of my fingertips.
You did really well. Let's see. Brenda's saying, did any of your deep sea exploration, have you done any deep sea exploration that's led to any personal insights?
I have personally, no, not me. I'm not a diver. I've never gone out.
You should be saying, I'm not a diver yet.
I'm not. Well, I read a bit of your biography. And I mean, it's not something I've experienced. My love of the ocean and my commitment to the ocean comes from the fact that I just live on it and I walk it every day. And I mean, if I'm not walking on it, I'm cycling to it, or I'm out in my kayak, or and there's nothing more frustrating for somebody who loves the ocean as much as I do to take a walk with a bag and come back with a full bag of garbage on the way home, or to be out paddling and be picking up plastic bottles that are floating in the ocean as I'm paddling. Those are all the kinds of things that drove me to do what I do. I've never been diving, but it's maybe someday.
Well, when we get our little submersibles for Sylvia finished, we'll have to get you on a submersible ride date.
Yeah. He dives in 2 submarines.
Yeah, it would be awesome.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I guess the other thing too with regards to oceans and the challenges that I've seen with climate change, my little communities that I represent, because I have 10,000 square kilometers of coastal communities is what I represent, and they rely heavily on small craft harbors for their fishing activities, and I've seen how devastated they become because of storm surges because of climate change. I mean, they're underwater now. We're seeing 100-year storms every 5 years. And those are the things that are so challenging, and making sure that communities can have the infrastructure that they need in order to do the jobs that they have to do is so critically important. And, one of the things we also did with regards to the Fisheries Act when we modernized it was there was always a policy where the owners of the vessels were the license holders, and they were the ones who reaped the benefits from it. But we were seeing more and more what I would call corporate creep into it. And so we enshrined in law that the person who owns the license has to fish it. And they're the ones who get there is no, there's no backdoor agreements with big corporations. The money stays in the rural coastal communities. And I think that was really, really important for me as well to see that legislation come through.
That's part of the issue, that it's the large scale, industrial scale extraction of wildlife. Coastal communities, people who have true dependence for sustenance, for their long-term culture, that's in a category apart from the large industrial scale on the high seas and even in coastal waters. We're too good at catching and not good enough about understanding what it takes to make the fish, what they need to survive. Yeah. We know how to kill. We're really good at that, but really getting into it to see what it takes to maintain a healthy population. That's where we're beginning to put our focus now.
Well, and I would also say that a lot of harvesters are conservationists, because they recognize, I mean, whether it's a quota-based fishery or an effort-based fishery, it doesn't matter. They know that there's so much out there, and we have to be careful how we're fishing it and making sure that we're not overfished, not taking more than we should, not taking it in times of the year when, lobsters are molting, or when, there's it's just they understand it. So making sure that the benefits of the fishery go directly to them has been something that's been very important to me.
There's been a disconnect as well with respect to valuing ocean wildlife, that they have a zero accounting base. It's pretty relatively easy to run a business if you don't have to pay for the goods that you sell.
Oh, I don't know, that it can be quite expensive to fish as well.
Yeah.
But globally,
I've seen some of these boats and some of the gear and some of the technology that people have to have nowadays. It's not your grandfather's fishing anymore, the way I see it.
Some of that technology is to find and capture a diminishing population. Before it used to be fairly easy because there are a lot of fish, they were close to shore. Now, in order to,
they have to go further afield.
you have to go further offshore and go deeper, and that takes more technology. But also, I don't know what the situation is exactly in Canada, but around the world, subsidies are keeping some of these industrial fishers actually in business. They couldn't survive, even though the goods are free.
Ish.
Yeah, no, that would not be the case. No. We actually, I will say that last year was challenging, of course, because of COVID and the end of export markets, and there was some supports put in place, but it was the first time we've ever had to do that. But that was more, but that was more because, we had people who but we did that right across the country for people to make sure that they were able to pay bills, and it didn't matter. But I mean, the fishing sector was one of the first sectors actually hit from COVID, because they were in my area, they fish lobster, and they fish it from November till May. They go out in the very worst time of year. They go out in the coldest waters in the Atlantic, because that's the best lobster, is cold water lobster, just so you know. And they what they were seeing was they would have a number of markets in Asia for Chinese New Year. And they were starting to, very early on, before the pandemic really even became a thing we were talking about, where they saw all of that drying up. So they were some of the first ones hit by the pandemic. And, having caught all of this with the idea of selling it, it's like, okay, we can't have them, we can't have this go to waste. What do we do? And so, we had to work very closely with industry to, we were predominantly a fresh market product. So we wanted to make sure that we put in place things for them for helping them with things like storage, freezing, value added, all things they never had to do because they would catch and go, So there was a lot of changes that we had to go through because of the pandemic that were definitely something that was
global markets have become part of the problem. That there's always, it's tempting to take whatever you can, because somebody will buy it somewhere. It's not staying in the community. The money stays.
Nova Scotia it's actually our largest industry is fishing and export, and predominantly lobster. That's our big one.
Yeah.
We have some more questions.
We do have more questions.
Okay.
Riley is asking, although Canada has its own pressing situation regarding threatened marine mammals, the most dire in the world is the vaquita, where there's only about 9 animals left. Given the recent US CMA agreement and its environmental components, has Canada done anything to press the Mexican government or offered any support to help save the vaquita?
I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what a vaquita is.
Oh dear. It's a beautiful little porpoise that is,
okay.
Is in the Sea of, Gulf of California. And it's been literally wiped out to the very brink of extinction by fishing with gill nets. And
gill nets.
They get wrapped up in the net and they drown. But,
So I
Well-
guess, I mean, with regards to whether or not Canada has done anything specifically for that, I really would say I'm not 100% sure, but I would say that, I mean, we are at a lot of international tables with regards to things like, mako sharks, a huge one that we've been working really hard to try and get more protections for. Very challenging, but that is one that is, tunas. There's all kinds of different ones that are definitely on our radar, but that is not one I am familiar with. I'm sorry to say.
Are there
You
unique?
know what I'm going to do after this meeting, though? I'm going to go
Check it
find out
out.
more about it. If there's anyone from my department on this call, they're going to be going out and finding out for me
Out.
tomorrow.
Well, it's the depletion of wildlife generally that we are experiencing on our watch. This is, we're this time of great extinction
Mhm.
that is unlike anything that's happened in human history, and we're the cause of.
Well, we look at orcas. Look at, I mean, the North Atlantic right whales, orcas,
Right.
the mako sharks. I mean, there's all kinds of things, and it's really, it's like I said, sometimes as the minister, and I have to make the decisions on what's allowed and what's not. It's really tough. It's really
Yeah.
hard to tell somebody whose whole life has been dependent on something that, no, sorry, you can't. And forage fish, I mean, we're seeing real declines in forage fish, mackerel, herring. And so it's really tough sometimes to tell people, well, when you used to get, 115 tons of that, you can have, 2 tons now.
Yeah.
Like that's significant for them.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to in Atlantic Canada, I just had to cut the mackerel fishery by 50%. And I know how hard that is for those fishers who rely on it.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
the ocean relies on the fish.
What do you do?
No.
I mean, if you don't have the forage fish, you don't have the other fish.
Correct.
And the
You've got it
mammals
right.
and the birds and everything
And
else.
everything is
ties
everything is
together.
interconnected. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
relates to climate. I think the whole concept of carbon in the ocean, as we talked about earlier, the ocean is the biggest carbon sink on the planet.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
it starts with the plankton, it starts with the kelp, it starts with the photosynthesis, but it goes into the food chains, including the
Yep.
little fish, and then the big fish, and then the whales, and and it stays in the ocean until we're taking out so much it really is affecting the carbon cycle.
Well, and of course, in off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, we had the collapse of the cod fishery
Yeah.
back in 28 years ago now, and I mean, it was basically shut down. There was no cod fishery, and everyone thought, well, it'll just come back. Well, it really hasn't. I mean, there is some, but it's not back. The interesting thing about that is that cod used to eat shrimp, and now we have this booming shrimp industry because there's all these shrimp because cod aren't there anymore. So I mean, it is interesting.
They
Yeah.
also ate baby lobsters,
Yeah. True enough.
and it's part of the explanation for why there are still lobsters, despite the fact that we've taken quite a few
Mhm.
Yeah.
when they're
The
grown-ups. at
predators are
least.
gone.
But yeah, it's understanding the system and finding our place within the system.
Yeah.
That is the challenge of the 21st century. Because
Well, and of course, we're also seeing because of climate change, species moving. I mean, we never would have seen certain species in certain areas that are now there. So we're seeing snow crab, for example, that used to be here in this area, not here anymore. It's now it's moving towards colder waters, and lobster. There used to be more lobster in Maine. It's now here. It's like it's moving towards colder. It's coming towards colder areas. So those are I mean, climate change is having a significant impact on a number of different species.
All right, we've got a couple more questions, and then we'll look for some takeaways. Terrence is wondering what he could do to open a dialogue around underwater munition removal with your office.
Well, you know what, Terrence, if you want to put your contact information in the chat, my staff are on here as well. They can maybe pick it up, and we can have an offline conversation and see if there is anything that can be done.
That's awesome. And Brenda is asking, how do people get involved with coming up with creative solutions? I mean, how can they support some of these initiatives?
Yeah. What can I do?
What can the Canadian
What
citizen
can I do? What can I do? Yeah,
What are our takeaways?
there's always, I think that there's everything from working with organizations that are committed to ocean protection that you can be involved in, to organizing your own community. It can be as simple as beach cleanup, which everyone thinks, well, there's got to be more. Absolutely, there is more. We have stream keepers and river keepers and guardian programs, and making sure we have in BC particularly, we have so many salmon organizations that are working so hard to do habitat restoration in British Columbia. Those are all ways for people to be involved. And I think that, whether it's through conservation groups, whether it's starting your own, whether it's like I said, we do a regular beach cleanup here. Well, I do one almost every day, it feels like, when I go out for a walk. but I would say that, it's finding like-minded people who have that passion as well. The other thing I think that's really important, and I'm honored to be on here with two women who are as passionate about oceans as I am, because one of the things we're seeing as well is that we need to get more women involved in ocean science and in ocean protection. And, that's one of the things that our government has been very committed to around the world, is having more women and girls going into the ocean sector. We're developing our blue economy strategy. There's a whole piece on that, and on diversity, on making sure we're addressing things in communities that aren't usually represented in the ocean sector. I don't know how many roundtables I've had that I'm the only woman there, and
I know that feeling.
Yeah, so frustrating. So I guess I would say, don't be afraid to reach out and find out more. Don't be afraid to start your own, and don't be afraid to look for opportunities in coastal communities where you can be part of that. And I'm often, invited to speak to women's organizations about getting more women involved in, not only in politics, but in oceans and ocean science.
So one recommendation that I would urge is vote for the right people.
I'm glad you said that. It would look self-serving if I said
it. We need leaders with the right ethic and the right understanding and the desire to make the world a better place. Be great if we could start 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, but right now, every day, the decisions.
We can't look behind us. We can't look behind us.
Look forward.
We have to look forward.
We
have to look at what that looks like for all of us. And, I think everyone has as I was saying to you earlier, the amount of Canadians who don't consider themselves part of an ocean nation because they live in central Canada. They live on the prairies. They've never seen an ocean, but, for anyone who lives in an ocean area, this is what drives them.
And what we have to do is get people to understand that the ocean, if you've never seen or touched the ocean literally touches you with every breath you take and every drop of water you drink.
It's all connected.
Canada is an ocean country, but this is an ocean planet.
Yep, absolutely. It's interesting because I work in Ottawa part-time. Well, I haven't been there for the last 15 months, but so I would fly up on a Saturday and fly back on a Thursday night. And when I got off the plane, I could just smell the ocean. And it was just like, oh, I'm home. Now the Halifax airport, the airport that I would fly into is a good hour from an ocean, but I can smell it as soon as I get off.
That's right. The spidey senses are going. The ocean senses, That's so awesome. Well, we're kind of almost at the top of the hour, and really respectful of your time and so forth today. So just thank you again so much for making the time to talk with us. And I hope we can connect with you again on some of these topics, maybe a little bit more in depth as some of these sanctuaries and marine protected areas come along.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This has been great, and I'd love to come back anytime.
And I love it when you say, in response to a question, I don't know, but I'll find out.
I'll find out.
That's so important.
Well, I got to be honest. I don't have a background in, I live on the ocean, but I don't have a background in oceans. And, I have learned so much since taking on this role. And, since being elected, I had a passion for the ocean, which is why I ran. But, it wasn't my life's work. But it's become that.
Yeah.
So-
We're grateful for that. Well,
All right.
before we close off today, Sylvia and I would like to say thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you to everyone. Thank our producers, Ocean Elders, and to everyone there in the community that keeps showing up and participating in Dive In. It really feels like home to us. I hope it feels like home to you too. And welcome to our home.
It's blue.
Water connects all of us, and we're so grateful to everyone. We're going to be back next time, actually just next week, talking with Tim Taylor about autonomous underwater vehicles and the Lost 52 project. So more things that are lost underwater for us to go investigate. And until then, remember, take care of the ocean
As if
your life depends on it,
because
It
they
does.
do.
it does.
It does, yeah.
It does.
Get our grammar right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Jordan. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you again.
Looking
Thanks a lot.
forward to diving in with you.
You have a submarine date with us, submersible date.
I would do that. Okay.
All right,
Thanks
let's do
so
it.
much.